It's 5 a.m. in the morning. I wake up. I'm not sure if I want to get out of bed, but something is tugging at me. They say the longest distance to cover in a run is from your bed to the ground. Wow. That sounds good. Maybe I should cover that distance today. Okay, I'm off the bed now. Let's get ready. It's time. It's time to get out of the house.
Economies of Khel, Episode 3, Run Bhoomi.
Back in the 90s, when cricket was the thing to do, there was nothing called running. In fact, I remember there was another activity that used to happen that time, which was jogging.
Oh, yes.
And the fascinating story about jogging for me is that no self-respecting, youthful, vigorous boy would be jogging. Right? Jogging was solely the arena of either people trying to lose weight or old people trying to get fit.
Yep.
And my memories of foggy mornings and Delhi winters was either people jogging or this laughter coming out of nowhere. So we had these laughing clubs in Delhi. So like you had to choose either you're a laughing club person or a jogging person. My own story with running was quite torturous because when we used to have cricket coaching, our coach used to punish us by make us run. So for me, running was always associated with punishment. Why are you laughing at my misfortunes, Kailash? Are you not feeling my pain?
Rahul, I have just run away from problems. I have not done any other kind of running, so it is a punishment.
So in today's episode, we are going to talk about running. Running is a very unusual sport to study because it's not a televised event. There are no famous Indian runners and it doesn't have a huge audience or fan base around it. In fact, we are going to study how running, from being just a sport which people participate in, has become a potentially very successful business. And in order to chart this story, we are going to invite a close friend of ours, Arvind Bharathi. So Arvind started as a runner and then he joined a company called Runners for Life, which would organize running events in Bengaluru and other parts of India. And as he developed as a runner and as an organization, he started coaching runners. And at some point, he joined Azim Premji University and started developing a program which trains students in the field of sports. And ask anybody in the Bangalore running circuit who Arvind is, and I guarantee you they'll be able to name him. Because Arvind, like that famous Coke ad which said, "Live cricket, eat cricket, sleep cricket," lives, eats and sleeps running and has been part and parcel of every running event that has happened in Bangalore in the last 2 decades. On Economies of Khel, we are very happy to welcome our guest Arvind Bharathi, also known as A2, and we'll get to that story maybe someday in the future. Welcome Arvind. Let's straight get into it. Which was your first race?
After college, I just randomly decided to take part in one of these events in Bangalore. It used to be called the Lipton Bangalore Marathon, I think. And they had, all these events have a Maja run sort of a distance, which was the 5K, I think, back then. So that, I think, was my first official running event. Yeah.
Arvind, why should our listener care about running today?
So this is something that I recently found out. It's a stat that we found out, that the popularity of marathon running across the countries they tried and studied, and India stands at the top of that list. So from 2008 to 2018, the popularity in marathon running in India has been 230%.
Oh, so like in context, like how would that compare to, let's say, some other country where running is popular?
Like a powerhouse, like let's say the US, it's 10%.
Whoa. So that means the numbers increased so much more in India than the US. So why do you think so many Indians got interested in running all of a sudden?
Most runners, when you speak to them, they'll have all these different reasons why they feel like they like running. I think it's mostly some sort of an addiction. It's a chemical thing. And you make up reasons later for why you like it. But yeah, I think it's that solitude that you get, right? You're out there and you're completely within yourself. You're kind of completely shut off from everything else that's happening there. So that's something that I always look forward to when I go for a run.
So Arvind, we have often heard that running is meditative. Is it really so, or is it just chemical addiction?
No, I guess meditation is maybe stretching it out a bit, but you do get into a zone, right? And it doesn't happen immediately. And I can talk for most runners. I think when we start, we're all grumbling. And there are ghost pains and you want to stop and your brain is cooking up all kinds of things saying, okay, you should stop, this is not natural. But I think after a kilometer or two, you start getting into the groove and then you start enjoying it. So it's actually a matter of those first 10 minutes. Once you cross that, you do feel something different. And I think that is addictive.
When was the first time you thought, like, okay, running has become something now? Marathons have become something. Did it start at any point?
Yeah, I think now more than ever you can, like, we don't come anywhere close. Running doesn't come anywhere close to cricket still, of course.
Yeah.
But there are like a significant number of people who do run now. But it's a fairly recent sort of a phenomenon. I think more 2009-10, I would say, is when it started really picking up, and mainly in the metros.
So, I mean, I was kind of thinking a little broader because, me and Kailash for a while have been talking about, how do sports become big and, why is there so much money being invested in sports? Now, running was always unusual for me because a lot of sports when you see in India, like their iconic moment is something happens and people see it. So, in cricket, you have 1983 World Cup. And then you can sort of think of maybe something like, Prakash Pardukan's, victory in badminton. There are moments which spark interest. And, I always see this. The year football World Cup is once in 4 years and suddenly everyone's interested in football. Running is not really a viewed sport. And in fact, it's quite hard to view because for me, I'm just seeing an hour of people just running. So, I mean, where can we trace back to the fact that running moved from just being a professional sport to something which is a larger mass phenomenon? Like, is there some place in history or some country where we can see that sort of thing?
No, I don't think it follows the similar sort of a trajectory to some of these spectator-led sports. So running, that's a very participative thing, right? So like you said, it's not fun to watch a marathon unless you really know what's happening. Similar to, let's say, the Tour de France, it's one of the most watched sports. But I don't think in India anybody watches because in Europe, half the people are cycling all the time, so they know what's happening. So
also,
running,
half the people here are stuck in traffic, so they don't want to see more of it. Yeah.
So there are 2-3 different components which kind of come together to get somebody to start. I think the biggest one is health. At some point in your life, you go to a doctor and they say that you have to start doing something. Now if you don't, things are going downhill, right? So that's how it starts.
That was jogging in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that age has come down, possibly from your 50s and 60s come down to 30s now when you get the same sort of signal from your doctor. So that I think is a big one. That's always riding the back of people's minds. And now I think more and more you see people around who are running, right? But back in 2009-10, it was more not that visible. So I think back then it was a lot of running groups which started this sort of a movement. So there was active recruitment going on. So if you're like living in a society or you're in an organization like, let's say, Infosys or Wipro, you would have a few people running and then they'll come back with these medals and they're like, oh, so you didn't win the marathon, but you still get a medal? And so there were lots of these draws.
CV pe aa gaya.
Yeah. Arvind, do be careful. You have talked about addiction and now you're talking like a cult which is getting people recruited. Is running safe?
It is a cult. I mean, I have to admit, it totally is a cult. And but I don't think it's any different from the CrossFit cult or the yoga cult, right? So, but this is in some sense a much larger cult. And I've been part of it and I've been one of the evangelizers, I think, for this. So I have all the entire pitch ready. The road is free.
Oh, wow.
Right? You don't need any gear. You don't need a gym membership. You don't need another person to, play a sport with, right? So all of those things kind of work in its favor.
So when I think of long distance running or marathon, I usually don't think of any sportsman. I usually think of brands, shoes, and at the front of my mind is Nike. What is this association between Nike and running? And how did it all start?
So college running scene was really big in the US, and we had this coach Bill Bowerman, who's the founder of Nike. And back then, he used to sell Onitsuka Tiger running shoes out of a van. And the name of the company was Blue Ribbon Sports. And at some point, he realized that he can do better and decided to use his wife's waffle iron to create his own pair of shoes. And that is the origin story of Nike. That's how they started.
So literally it started from a garage and it became probably one of the largest
More like a
multinational
kitchen, but
corporations.
yeah.
So let's hear a bit about Bill Bowerman.
He made Nike the company that it is today.
And Bill used to always tell us that we're not going to focus on your weaknesses. We're going to build on your strengths.
Bill would come up to me and said, if you're going to be a leader, you need to know where you're going.
So running has now found its product, and what it needs is someone to elevate it to a status where people really want to wear it. And that time in America, there was this upcoming cool runner whose hair was open and flying back, and he had this cadence of run which was like tuck, 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 tuck. He sort of became popularly known as Prefontaine or Steve Prefontaine. Tell us a bit about him, Arvind.
Prefontaine, Prefontaine was, like, if you think about history of running, is not there in any record books, but he was the poster child for Nike. And I think the Nike's marketing machine really put their weight behind him, and he was one of those rebellious sort of figures back then, right? Who everybody kind of really, and this was that time when you wanted to be like that. And Nike really used that image and kind of also associated their brand, and they still try to do that, right? So they were riding on him. Yeah, and that kind of was the time when it was really picking up in the US.
Let's hear a bit about the legend that was Steve Prefontaine.
Prefontaine arrived at the University of Oregon in 1969 when college campuses were at the center of a changing world. He came as an athlete, but soon came to symbolize much more. Measured in numbers, he was a success. 7 NCAA titles, every American record between 2 and 10,000 meters, undefeated on his home track over a mile. But more, Pre was a phenomenon. He stood for individualism, rebellion, and the pure joy of competition.
So similar to the US, in India, was there a time where it became popular? You said 2009, 10. Who are the people selling shoes or running out of the van here? How did the communities grow? How did it become popular here?
So here, the popularity didn't come through professional sport. So like you said, even now it's difficult to come up with any name of any marathon runner from India who's done really well. We tend to do really well in middle distance actually, and we have good marathon runners, but I don't think it followed that same story. Here it was more a groundswell that happened more because of health reasons. The earlier runners were all, I think, corporate, who stayed in the US or UK, picked up the habit there, came back here. And then, at least in Bangalore and in the thick of it when it was happening, so the corporate running movement really grew. So that, I think, was a starting point. And of course, our woeful medical numbers kind of helped us go down that path. So the numbers are very less. Like Bangalore would have had 30-40 people who are running. This is like 2006. And used to do these Sunday runs where you could run around Alsur Lake, run on MG Road on a Sunday for 3 hours and come across 3 cars. That's the kind of
And then
scene
you can
it
have
was.
breakfast at Koushik's.
Yeah, actually that what you just said is a big component of running. So you basically go for a run and then meet for breakfast in airlines or Koushik's. That was the thing, right? So that's how the community grew.
Do you think breakfast is the only way you can motivate people to run, or is there anything else?
Yeah. Then our organization realized that events are what kind of get more people started. So as soon as you say, oh, there is this new event, why don't you come and take part? People would then want to come and run. So if I just ask you to come out and run a 5K, then probably lesser chances of getting you out. But if I say a couple of months down, there is a run where if you finish the run, you'll get a medal and a certificate. That kind of always works with Indians, right? Like you get a medal. So that was the draw, I guess. That's how it slowly started growing.
And were there other communities, like apart from your organization, which also started during that time?
Yeah, so I think all the metros these groups started mushrooming around there. So Chennai Runners is another big one which started, Hyderabad Runners. Mumbai is too big, so there are many smaller groups that are there. So in fact, we used to have a social media platform back then.
Oh, wow.
This is pre-Facebook. And that had a lot of running clubs. So there was a groups feature and a lot of running groups started across the country. And at that point, I think we were the largest running community in India with 40,000 runners.
Oh,
So
wow.
all of this happened in like 4-5 years. So it was a pretty...
So I would say, maybe there's no coincidence in the fact that, some of the earliest runners were people who were involved in technology from the US coming back, and then a lot of the community being built on what's the earliest forms of social media and, building community awareness.
Yeah, like actually speaking, running is something which would appeal, I think, a lot more to the nerds. That's what I used to think back then, because it's something that you can get good at if you are just at it, right? So it's not one of those natural talent flair sort of a sport, at least in India. Of course, you have people who are natural and they are good, but some of the best runners I know are over 40 years, and they used to, at least back then, have Excel sheets of their training routine. So they'll turn up every morning doing something or the other, and they would just be at it regularly, and they're like really good. Will qualify for Boston Marathon, which is like not an easy thing to do.
And I think that's one other common point. Like if you think about what it takes to get good at a sport, like you're saying in running, it requires a kind of drive to do it regularly. You need a community. But it seems like a lot of running is actually understanding and crunching data and thinking in numbers. And I'm also trying to sense that there's a certain kind of mind where it gets attracted to thinking completely or breaking something down completely into smaller components.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common sight to see some of these runners go back home and plug in their watch to their laptop and go over the numbers and compare it for the last 6 months, 2 months, 3 months, all of that. So it is, I've been there, so I totally understand how that happens.
So you mentioned that a lot of people who moved from the US came here, started, and with the Mumbai Marathon, you have Standard Chartered, Tata I think is sponsoring now. So there seems to be involvement of corporates, right? And I think Bangalore had TCS, which runs marathon. What's with this corporates just taking up these marathons? Why does that happen?
So internationally speaking, I can understand. Like we actually, TCS and Wipro also sponsor large marathons outside India. Right?
What do you mean?
Yeah, and sponsorship is a big part of any of these larger events. You have all kinds of partners. So you have Standard Chartered or Tata, what you call for Mumbai Marathon, is the title sponsor. And then you have a running partner, which could be a Nike, Adidas, any of them. Then you have like a hydration partner, which is Gatorade, in that direction. Then all kinds of watch partner, timing partner. So it's like a huge list of things. So for an event like, let's say the Mumbai Marathon, it's a marquee event for the city. And you would see everybody out there on the road at that time. And even your newspapers for the next 2 days and the week before, everything is around this event. So there's a lot of visibility that you get. And you're also directly reaching the customer, right? So you're wearing like a bib number which says Tata Mumbai Marathon. So you have like 50,000 running billboards on that day.
Right.
So it's a big thing. So it's something that is popular and there's big money. And usually those companies will have HR programs which will have significant amount of their budget going in this direction. So the pitch would be that, okay, we are going to do this run. You have a certain amount of money kept aside per employee for you. Why don't you sponsor this event? And you will have like 5,000 of your employees coming and running in this event at no cost. In fact, Spirit of Wipro Run is one of the oldest corporate runs that we've had in the country. And in the coming month, on the 6th of October, we have the Wipro Bangalore Marathon happening. And I'm participating in that. So it might be good actually to talk to Sunil Chainani, who was a fellow runner, one of the earliest people to start running here, is part of many corporate organizations, has a lot of experience there. So maybe we should ask him.
So I think that, several things happened in the early part of the 21st century. Till then, there were very few running events in India for amateurs. I mean, there were the national competitions, but for amateurs, there were very few running events. And I believe one of the first big events of this kind was the Bombay Marathon in 2004. And also, from what I've heard from some people, is that the organizers wanted to do it on a grand scale and make an impact in the city, not just make it a small run. So a run which was through the city, the best parts of the city, live on TV with some good international runners. Soon thereafter, 2005, there was a Bangalore Marathon, which was the first city Bangalore Marathon. It started in the heart of the city and covered many of the better parts of the city. And that got quite a few people interested in the running. Now, at that time, there were very, very few people who were running a full marathon. I believe both in the Bombay Marathon and here, they put in shorter distances to encourage more people to participate and hope that people would progress from one level to another. And as far as I know, the first sort of organized group which came up in the country to get runners together was Runners for Life in Bangalore, which I believe came up in 2006, or it got active in 2006. And suddenly there were a lot of people running together. There were events, training runs or fun runs every week or every alternate week. And that got people a little more involved in running. And I think from there it really took off, because as people started seeing more events happen, have more running events coming up, coaches started coming up. Firstly there were just a few across the country, but now that's exploded. And this led to one thing led to another. So events started happening in different parts of the country. But this also, all these events, there were shorter runs which got others interested. So people were doing 10Ks and 21Ks. And the 21K guys were aspiring to become marathoners. The 10K guys were aspiring to become half marathons. So this really led to the growth. From then to now, I understand there are now close to 2,000 running events in India. 2,000. So that means that average weekend there were 30 to 40. That's what somebody told me. I don't have any data. I know that on the 17th of December 23, there was a 25K in Calcutta, and I met some people there, and there were some sponsors there. One of them told me on that same day of 17th December, there were 8 events across the country. So on one day. So it's just, that's how it has grown.
Hi Sunil, so you are someone who's worked for a while in the corporate industry and you've been running for a long time. I'm curious to know, do you think there is any association between CEOs, upper management, corporate culture and running?
I honestly believe that people who participate in any activity like sports or any interest like that, they tend to be much better managers. They have a goal, they train, they have this discipline. And that reflects in work. And I think it's in a way related to this, why corporates may even encourage people to be doing something like their employees to be getting, aside from the fitness benefits, but other benefits that come from this. So I think for the corporates, a great deal at a fraction of the cost of doing soccer or cricket or tennis. So it's a fraction of the cost and amount of publicity they get in the city. Absolutely amazing.
So if I had to just sort of ideate, like I've seen these blogs which say couch to road. So if let's say I'm someone who wants to participate in the next marathon, what are the costs or basic costs I have to, or what is the basic spending I have to do to be able to reach there?
So ideally, you don't really need much, but of course that's not what everybody will make you believe. So let's go through
the runner's toolkit.
Yes.
The
or
road might be free,
kit bag.
but the shoes is costly.
Yeah, let's start with the shoes, right? So running shoes nowadays, I don't think you'll get anything less than, I remember going to the different factory outlets, and nothing's less than 8,000 rupees, right? So,
Whoa.
So shoes, of course, starting point. Then the gear. You can't, if you want to be called a runner and not a jogger, you have to have that look, right? You have to have the running. So shoes have to be those brightly colored shoes. There is a reason why they are brightly colored. That's the reason that's given to people, which is when you're running in the evening or morning, you should be visible and you shouldn't get run over by some car, right? So everything has to be bright. The shoes will be fluorescent. The shorts will be smaller, and it's for better aeration. And again, lots of reflective material on the shorts, the t-shirt. Then you need a watch, of course, nowadays, a GPS watch which tracks how much you've run, how much distance, what's the pace, what's the heart rate, all of that. Anywhere starting from, let's say, 20,000.
20,000?
Yeah, going all the way up to, I don't know, many lakhs.
Wait, 20,000 is the minimum?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so we've got our suit and we've got our shoes and we've got our watch. Do I need anything else to go for a run?
Yeah, depends. Now, if you're running in Mumbai, you will sweat a lot. So you need headbands and wristbands and all that stuff, cap. Every event has its own sort of conditions for which you need to prepare. So you might wear like a vest more, or nowadays you also have, not nowadays actually, it's something that's been common. People carry like a waist pouch which will have your bottles, it'll have energy gels which you need, some of them caffeinated to get you through that lull that happens in a marathon. So there are many, things that you can carry.
So this is all expenses when you're actually running. Like, do people spend money in like how they eat, what they eat, how they train, who they train with? Like, are there other costs involved with becoming a runner?
Yeah, definitely. There are lots of those as well. So now, and this is something that I used to do, so I know how this works. So you get somebody to start running first, and then you say, oh, if you want to run better, you have to do strength training. So there, the earlier pitch of no gym membership goes away. You need something there. You need a trainer if you want to get better. Now there's also yoga linked to running that you can do. You also need to look at your nutrition a lot more carefully. So you have your supplements that you'll need to take. There are lots of companies now which offer you many supplements for different things, creatine, protein, everything that's there in even other sports, right? So all of those also come into play. But my favorite is the pasta party. Okay, so there's something called a pasta party that happens a few days before a large marathon, where you do something called a carb loading. Your body needs to have a lot of carbs when you're running a marathon.
Okay, so now I'm just going to quickly think a little more broadly or in a macro way. Like me and Kailash have been talking about, every sport discovers an audience, and then a bunch of businesses jump aboard because there's a captured audience and they're thinking about how do we monetize this. So what you're telling me now is the runner who was going to do the simple act of running with the shoe has now been convinced that he needs to spend money in all these ways to be a better runner, and there is suddenly all these opportunities for businesses to come in and monetize this. And I was thinking, that you told me the story about how one of the interesting things Nike did, it caught on very early on about running communities and tried to sort of build a way where people associated their brand with running. Like, can you tell me a bit more about that?
We were actually hired by Nike early on, I think 2008. And we conducted something called the Nike Run Club for them. This is something that they do in all the major cities across the world. It's a very simple concept. Running shoe is not easy to buy, right? So we all have different kinds of feet. You go to the shop, you wear, and most of us don't even wear that shoe for more than like 2 minutes. So Nike Run Club was a platform where you could come and train for running, where there was a coach. But what also used to happen was you could actually try a running shoe for that entire duration. So you come there, give your car keys or a wallet or something which is substantial for those people, and you actually get to try a shoe for that entire training. So you would run like a 5K, you come back, and the next time you can try another shoe. So maybe over a couple of weeks, you know which shoe works the best for you, and then you can actually go and buy. That's invaluable for somebody who's running long distance.
So were people using Nike shoes while running?
Yeah, I mean, we did some sort of a survey actually early on. The biggest run in Bangalore back then was the Sunfeast 10K, which is now called the TCS 10K. And we did just like a shoe count at the end. And there were like shoe count from the perspective of which brand shoes are being used by most runners. So Nike was not one of the top shoes back then. And then after the Nike Run Club started, and the numbers in Nike Run Club also increased quite a bit, 2-3 years down the line, the same shoe count had a significant difference in the numbers. So Nike was now one of the top shoe brands that runners preferred.
So we started our story with Nike in America in the 1970s and how running became popular. And we jumped to how running became popular in India after 2008, and once again Nike played a very important role. We traced the progression from small communities running to races being organized, and we talked to A2 who was part of it, to corporates sponsoring races, and races is becoming big iconic events for different cities. We talked a bit about when someone wants to enter running, what are the costs they have to take. But thinking a little ahead, what do you think is the future of running in India?
Rahul, I think I will do some predictive crystal ball gazing here. It is something of a dream that a league format might come up. Think of a situation where Each city has their own team, something like Tour de France, where it's a set of runners who are running multiple races. The league might also look into different terrains. People might, do different kinds of races. A road race in between traffic. You go run in the desert next to the border. You run on the beach, on the hills. So all these different kinds of terrains, and this team of runners are running in all these things. And there might be championship points or whatever it is. So, but the league format is something which is certainly we can dream of. So I think that's the future. But more importantly, if you have to bring in technology, think about if we could run the Boston Marathon in Bangalore, right? We put on the VR glasses, maybe go on the treadmill, or maybe just run wherever there is space. But what you see would be, you would be running in the Boston Marathon through the streets with all the cheer.
And so all these famous runners running right next to you, and you're seeing all these iconic...
Right. If VR can take you to the front seats, you're into esports.
No, but I mean, if let's say I'm running, okay, and my heart rate is going up, and the runner who I'm running,
Hi, this is Narayan, and that's the end of this episode. But do you know that on Radio Azim Premji University, there's just a lot of good stuff happening. Whether it's Ghalib, whether it's history, whether it's Pani Puri, whether it's harmonium, whether it's the Bhakti Republic, whether it's cricket, whether it's science, whether it's mathematics, we've carried it all. You shouldn't miss this. Get subscribing.
You're listening to
आप सुन रहे हैं
You're listening to Insunothar.
ನೀವು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ
ರೇ ಕಥಾ ಸುನ್ ರೇಡಿಯೋ
Azim Premji
ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿ.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. This non-commercial program is for educational purposes only.